Hi, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm Melody Brue, and this is Robert Kramer. Welcome to our very first edition of The Enterprise. We have, if you've been following along, and hopefully you have, we've been doing the Hot Desk podcast for, I don't know, maybe a year now. I started out doing
Absolutely.
it with Patrick Moorhead, and then Robert joined me, and we were talking about things in collaboration and enterprise apps, and then we got into ERP and data management, and it sort of started to sprawl. And we talked about this, and we decided that we wanted to really focus in on insights and strategies for key business and IT decision makers. So here we are with the enterprise, renamed, brand new, first episode, and for a new year. So, we're going to kick this off with some of our key trends that we're seeing for 2025, but also just sort of a little bit of a look back on 2024. And if you missed it, you can go onto the Moor Insights and Strategy website and see there's a whole list of things that all of the analysts at the firm published on kind of the things that maybe gave a little bit of a surprise in 2024, and then the things that we're all looking forward to in 2025. So, Robert, you want to kick that off with like
Yeah.
what was something in 2024? I mean, I'll give you like a little tee up here because I think one thing that maybe surprised a lot of people was how much attention was given to ERP and obviously your swim lane in 2024. Why was that so important? And also, what's going to happen in 2025 with that?
Well, great setup there, and happy New Year to you. And everything is it was a lot about AI last year, and it should be right. It's a great tool. It's a great technology that is being embedded in a lot of things. So I cover three different swim lanes, but all three of those swim lanes, ERP and SCM and enterprise data and data protection, it was all one of those. Um, Areas that is used to actually make things more efficient, to make things better. And ERP, I think, got kind of pushed aside because of the fact that it wasn't seen as sexy, maybe. But it's
Mhm.
really the key to the operation. It's the anchor of a company. That actual transaction volume that it produces really is the operational information for a company to be successful. So AI was embedded into um, ERP and SCM applications throughout. But the problem is many of those applications are still on-prem. So some of those tools that want to be embedded cause for a modernization of those applications. And the companies are still two-thirds of them are still on-prem, which I see that as a major push for this coming year. And I'll get into that in just a minute. But lots of new tools are being embedded into ERP and SCMs, and it's becoming a forefront. And why? And the question to you is, if you owned a major company, do you want to keep on adding technology to your technology stack, or try to find a way to embed it or utilize features and functionality in your ERP to keep it as tight as possible? So that will be a major discussion for 2025 and different tools that could be used to keep it all more of a turnkey. But one of the other swim lanes was data protection, and some of the major vendors, which were Cohesity, who merged with, or didn't merge, they bought part of Veritas. Rubrik went IPO. Veeam got a capital investment, and also Commvault had some major plays themselves with some acquisitions. These companies are embedding AI to kind of go after the bad actors to make it easier to recover. But there's a lot of great technologies that are being embedded for 2025, and observability is another area where the monitoring functions are getting put together in platforms with the data protection. And then lastly, the enterprise data, which consists of like the data bricks that has a huge investment that's going on with them to take that platform to a totally different level, with Snowflake being a competitor, Cloudera, and there's a few other ones, Teradata. There's a lot of intelligence platforms that are looking to take this data, whether it's structured or unstructured, marry it together where it could be utilized and algorithms could actually produce more intelligence for you. So we saw that last year. This year will be a little bit different, but we'll touch base on that in a second. And all what I just said probably plays a serious role or significant role with your swim lanes. And so, from that perspective, did you see similar types of movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think, everybody was focused on AI, and really, I think we talked about this on several different occasions about just sort of like the growth and what was going to happen in terms of like what feature sets and now I think what we're going to see this year, especially in enterprise apps, is the deeper AI integration within applications and the focus on, like you were talking about data security, the focus is going to have to be on trust and on ROI. And then the other thing that's going to happen is the focus on pricing. There's going to be a big focus on how people are going to price AI. We started out with, Copilot and everything being $30 per user per seat. When you get to agentic AI, having the agents, which is, so that word can sometimes be confusing when you're talking about like contact center and all that. The agentic AI perform tasks that per seat per user model doesn't work,
Hmm.
because that those can be a series of tasks. So the consumption based pricing, the per user pricing, I mean, there's going to we're going to get a little bit of a shakeup, I think, this year. And people are going to have to see the kind of the efficiency, the interoperability, and the user-centric design. We already saw people really unhappy with pricing on across the board, I think, on enterprise apps this past year. So build AI into that, and you've got even more issues. So that is kind of my big kind of look back, look forward for enterprise apps. I mean, I have multiple swim lanes, but I think a couple that I think are really important. That was one. The other one is in the collaboration space. And whether that is, we're talking like Zoom and WebEx and, we're like video conferencing tools, or CX and customer service, anything like that. I think voice is going to become more important than it ever has been. And that's because we're able to actually get data from it. For the
Hmm.
longest time, the only data we could get from voice was somebody taking notes. So now AI is going to be able to give us the information from what people say and make that actionable. So for a long time, people were trying to get away from voice and they were trying to use chatbots, and that made people so frustrated. How many times have you said, talk to a human, talk to a human? And people got away from, and everything was omni-channel. And I'm not saying that's going to go away, that's going to remain. But people got tired of having to enter in too much information, having to go through multiple channels, having to repeat themselves. Voice is going to become a really important channel in 2025 because one, it's better, and two, it's no longer unstructured data. So that's going to be a huge one throughout, I would say throughout multiple swim lanes, but that's, data
What do
being
you
one.
think about the consumption? Because I'm a big fan of that, especially specifically in the swim lanes that I'm in, just because it segregates users when it's not consumption, but it has to be implemented correctly.
You mean a consumption-based pricing model?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the problem with a consumption-based pricing model is just the planning. So people want to know what their bill is going to be every month. So that's, when I talk to vendors about pricing, that's usually the issue, is that they don't want to give their customers a big surprise bill, and customers don't want a big surprise bill at the end of the month. So, I mean, it's sort of like when you look back into the early days of cloud, people weren't sure what their bill was going to be. People want a predictable bill. And
Yep.
so there's that sort of unpredictability of that. I think that there can be somewhat of a middle ground on that, where you can have a up to this amount.
Right.
Grammarly did that when they first started out with usage, where they said, you have up to like 1,000 tokens or whatever they use to use that. Once you go over that amount, well, they had a kind of like a hard stop. Well, no one wants that. So I think they've built some flexibility into it where then you can just add on, and then you have, maybe you don't have a surprise bill, but at least I'm paying for this, and if I go over, it's X amount. But when it's a pure consumption based pricing, I think you might get yourself in some trouble, unless you're really strict with what users are using it. I mean, you may have somebody who's just, playing around, especially like in these AI studios where you can build your own model. You don't realize that the amount that you're using just to, like, you might just be playing around like you're in a sandbox, but you're actually using quite a bit of power just to build these AI agents, and then you might get some massive bill that you're not expecting. So that's where I think the consumption-based models may not,
I agree
they're
with you.
not.
But if you look at why do I want consumption based? I mean, what's the benefit for the organization that has the software? Well, it's to get more users on the system. It's to be able to have, say it's an ERP system. I might not want to buy licenses for someone who touches the application once every 3 or 4 days, but their information is super important. So what
Yeah.
I'm able to do is now have all that input. Some of the ERP vendors are doing consumption based pricing based upon, like what you said, there's levels and they're billing that same amount. But if, like I said, if I'm that owner of that company, I'm losing that data or that inability of that person to be on the system. So I think it needs to be figured out this year because I don't think it's not figured out. You throw AI in there, that adds a huge element of time that's whether it's being paid for or not being paid for, and I think that's a component that needs to be figured out this year.
Yeah, and the reality is you want people using it. I mean, if AI is going to deliver on the promises of productivity and all of the things that, we're going to get rid of the what did Benioff say, the soul crushing work and all of that, then you want your employees using it. So you actually want to pay for it. The money that you can save by your employees using it is worth the money to pay for it. So you want to encourage the adoption of it. But
Absolutely.
you also want to make sure that people are using it wisely and that you don't have people just like, asking, so let's say, like, Gemini is consumption based, and I'm asking Gemini 800 questions about my kids' homework and about, the stew I made for dinner instead of the work I'm
Reasonable.
doing. And then all of a sudden, the stew I made for dinner was actually really good. It was a New York Times recipe, by the way. It's
Sounds good.
freezing here in Texas, so we're having some nice, cozy, warm dinners. But
Sounds delicious.
while some of the country is on fire, we're freezing. I don't know what's happening in this
We're
world.
sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think that'll be something that we'll figure out this year. And I think, you know, the w- I'm really curious, and I don't necessarily have a prediction about this, but I I have somewhat of a, like, on a human level prediction about this, that I think that AI is not going to replace humans. I think this year we're not even close to it in 2025. There's going to be some point down the road where AI is going to replace some jobs, but AI will also create jobs. But 2025 is going to be a really important year where we learn to work with AI. It's not all going to happen this year. I think we've got like a 2, maybe 3-year learning curve of how people are really going to learn to work with AI. But that, like, human in the loop and human and AI element is going to surface this year in a big way, I think.
Yeah, I've been talking a little bit about Industry 5.0, which is human and robot interaction, where the humans monitor the robots
Hmm.
and they take the best of what was done and they manage it strategically. And so it's a big, I think this is the year that that kind of takes off a little bit. Not that I'm getting into my predictions yet, but I think that's a huge thing because I was on on a call earlier as a podcast with some ERP people, and they they keep on talking a lot about AI and how that's going to be just a gigantic influence. But I think, of course, we want that. We want things to be easier and faster and better. But there's a lot of things that go before that that need to be done to be set up to get that in place. And I also, we cannot get rid of the humans because they're going to make the decisions. The one thing that I think is a huge component is trust. And you mentioned it before. And we have to know that how far are we able to trust the AI components of our systems to be able to let that go? And I'm not sure how much we are, but it depends on
Mhm.
the organization and what industry they're in and what compliance factors that they're up against and what their vision is with it. So
Yeah. So you said that the humans will sort of have the oversight over the AI, and I think the flip side is also true, that there will be AI that's sort of trained to have oversight over the humans. So in the case of like just routine contracts, where people are just constantly, let's say like insurance contracts, for example, those are just, being churned out, churned out, churned out. There could be AI that just is reviews contracts and is just trained to catch something that's wrong, or catch, you might be missing
mhm,
this. And so in terms of like content management, where it's extracting metadata, where the AI is sort of what looking over the human's shoulder and saying, oh, hey, I can help you with that.
yeah,
Hey, you missed that. I can help you with that. Right. Like, so I think it goes both ways a little. And that's where that like human and AI working together is going to happen over. And like I said, it's not going to be solved this year. That's going to be
right.
a couple of years, I think.
I
So,
agree.
yeah.
Well, what predictions do you have for 2025 that we haven't covered or that you'd like to go through that you think are super important beyond
I,
what we've talked about?
I think we covered kind of some big ones. Um, I think one thing that is I I think this is sort of a long way off, but I mentioned Benioff and his whole thing about, Salesforce has gone so deep into like Agentforce and all of this agentic AI, and the timing of agentic AI and how much that will actually happen in 2025, and then how much work does that produce, and how much revenue does that produce for a company? Those have been the big discussions around that. Well, if you look back like 2 years ago in Davos, Benioff was talking about AI, and if AI can produce all of this revenue for companies and can actually act like a human and create companies and revenue, how are how will companies be taxed on that? And I think that's such an interesting conversation. And I don't have
Mhm.
the answer, and I haven't heard much discussion on that since then. But I think that's something we should be thinking about. And especially if AI is going to replace jobs, then what?
Yeah, that's a good point. Every industry is talking about it and talking about how do we get our application layer to be able to absorb those tools to be more productive. And I think there's some serious concerns, but excitement. And
Right.
I think there's a major change management influence there that these companies aren't set up for this at all, and that it's predicated on data. I love the technology move to that direction because it's Benioff's always been that way, that he's always had that foresight to bring in new technology. I'm not sure the application mirrors his vision, or maybe the companies that use it aren't ready for it because their back end isn't set up for it, or they haven't transpired or haven't transitioned as quick as the software has. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Um, I mean, I think it's a great application. I've used it myself, but at the same time, I've never been at a company that has had it at a level that we could take advantage of the great technology that's inherent in Salesforce. So what he's proclaiming is great, but I'm not sure it's a apples to apples that everybody's going to be able to use it. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I've only seen the demos and the demos look good, but I've seen a lot of demos that haven't quite been, most of these demos are canned. But, I think one of the things that we saw, I think I even wrote about this, that, you know, at Dreamforce, they invited people to like come and get their hands dirty and play with the agents and make their own agents and use them. So to me, that's a pretty big show of confidence if
Hmm.
you're going to say like, hey, come and use it. And when a company is willing to give you like hands-on time with something, I think that means that it's probably farther along than most things.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, in the field of ERP and what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of activity to take advantage of the technologies of automation and AI and even IoT, and even further integrate with SCM, which is supply chain management. So ERP is trying to bring other factors in to get data from other areas to automate, to modernize. I think that change management will be a gigantic component this year because everybody realizes that they have um, change coming. That they have to, if they want AI to be a major component of their business, they can't do it with an antiquated system. So they have to put the position in place, the processes, and the people to make sure it happens in the data. And so I see ERP as being a major factor to moving forward with their modernization effort. I don't think companies can really be successful long term if they don't modernize because of the fact their competition they'll be passed up. And the tools are so amazing in these applications that they're going to need to take advantage of them as margins shrink, competition is more fierce, challenges are there, globalization, the supply chain with different factors involving, how you ship and how you produce and how you use different vendors. And then me and you have talked a ton about this is sustainability. Not as necessarily like, hey, I have to have a sustainable, way that I produce goods or sustainable building. I'm talking about a practice, a way of your business actually full capacity running. And I think that that's going to be a major deal this year because I think companies like larger companies will mandate if you want to do business with us, you have to have this level of sustainable um, practice because of the fact that that's who we want to do business with. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but it will happen. And companies like Oracle and Infor and SAP are having areas of their ERPs that will allow you to do this. I know that you have a family member that works for a company that has a sustainable product as well. And I think this is going to be a growing trend. And then the governance for all of this. But one thing that you've always talked about, you build, you buy, or you partner. We haven't talked about this on this episode, but I see that as a major part because companies can't build quickly and they can buy or they can partner, and it allows them to serve the customer the way that they need to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, on the sustainability front, I think in 2025, we're going to see it really focusing more as a business imperative and less as uh, I think where some people look at sustainability as almost politicized and as sort of like a feel good thing, or it's usually even a separate it's reported separately. Like it's, here's our sustainability report and here's our finances. And I think those things are not going to be so separate moving forward. And part of that is regulation. And
Yep.
much of the world is ahead of us on that, ahead of the US on that. But the other part of it is that with AI, these data centers have to have better sustainability or they're just not going to run.
Yep.
So I love that, companies like Dell and HP focus on circularity, and Cisco has like everything that they're shipping now is all 100% the recycled. The box that, the box that it comes in and everything. Everything is being built with a sustainable purpose, like down to like the speaker mesh. I mean, everything. The sustainability mandates are fantastic, but they're still somewhat in the minds of, I think, the industry in general. Sustainability is still a separate thing from the business, and I'm seeing that come around, especially with companies like Cisco and Dell, and HP, where it's part of the core business now. And a
Mhm.
lot of smaller companies like Oceant, Solidigm, it is core to their business. It's core to what they do. And that's because of AI and the data centers. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that in 2025. And that makes me very happy for many reasons. And definitely don't want to politicize this, but I'm sure you've seen the conversations happening about, everything that's happening with climate change and whether, we're getting snow in Texas and fires in California. Does it have anything to do with climate change? Well, whether it does or it doesn't, the fact that we're running out of energy to operate data centers should just make people realize that we will stifle innovation if we don't do something about energy usage. So I think,
Agreed.
nobody
It's the
loses
best
by,
practice. Why not do it?
right, nobody loses by us having better energy practices. So, um, with that, you are off to some events coming up, right?
Yep. This month is going to kick off towards the latter part, but I'm going to be going to Acumatica, which is they're actually doing consumption-based pricing for their ERP system, and then I'll be going to Zoho after that and seeing you in Austin. But in between, I'm actually going to Microsoft for a conference there, and then after Zoho, I'll be at SAP. So four different ones back to back to back to back. So how about yourself?
I actually am home until, well, actually, funny thing is, the Zoho Day is in Austin, and I'm in Austin, so I'm home, at least that I know of. You never know when things pop up, but I'll be working from Austin until Zoho Day, and then I've got a number of things just goes boom right after that. But it's
It's
been
going to be a
nice.
whirlwind year. We're going to have such uh, just an amazing amount of innovation that these companies that we're covering are going to be, releasing partnerships, IPOs, lots of new developments, and I think this is the year where things kind of come together a little bit. And I'm seeing that some of those partnerships that evolved last year, seeing how they actually move forward with some potential with seeing how those affect the customers. But it's going to be an exciting year.
It is, and I think, we started out with explaining kind of what this new podcast is about, and one of the things that we will be doing and y'all can look forward to is we'll be covering some smaller companies. So typically at Moor Insights Strategy, we cover the very large enterprise companies. We are going to identify, maybe not every week, but probably every other week at least, identify some smaller companies that we are keeping an eye out on. So definitely reach out to us. Let us know what you want to hear. If you are a smaller company and you want us to know about you, you want to be on our radar, reach out to us. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. Hit us up on Twitter. Follow, like, comment, do all the things. We want to know the good, the bad, the ugly. Like Pat used to always say, if you had something good to say it to me. If you have something bad to say, let Robert know. But thanks for watching. This was our very first episode, number one of the Enterprise. We will see you next week. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.